Chapter 4 of New Meds. Summary. Tim's still sick. He gets worse. They call Leslie. For this chapter, we also have a bunch of, usernames for a group chat. So, Bruce's extended brood. Dick. Ray of Sunshine. Steph. Purple Monster. Bruce. Wet Blanket. Jason. Zombie. Cass. Ballerina shoes. Meditation emoji. Babs. Library Geek. Tim. Stalker. Duke. Lightning Bug. Damien. Blood Brat. Alfred. Alfred. When Alfred next came down to check on Tim, he found Bruce still attempting to work on his tablet, but with Dick leaning asleep on his shoulder, checking on Tim revealed that his temperature had increased. Alfred furrowed his brow. That was not what should be happening. He was on enough antibiotics that it should be coming down by now. Bruce, seeing Alfred's expression, asked, "What's wrong? Is he okay?" Master Timothy's fever should be reducing, but it has increased since I last checked it. I do believe it might be time to call Dr. Tompkins. Alfred leaves the room to make the phone call. Dick stirs as Bruce reaches out to brush Tim's forehead. "What happening?" Dick mumbles, lifting himself off Bruce. Bruce looks at Tim for a moment longer before replying. "Alfred's worried that Tim's fever is increasing. He wants Leslie's input." Dick is immediately more alert. "It's worse? But is he going to be okay?" Dick knows he hasn't been on good terms with Tim, but he can't lose him. Tim is still his little brother. Bruce grabs Dick's hand. "He'll be okay. Leslie will know what to do." They wait in silence as Alfred comes back and informs them that Leslie is on their way. He then leaves to greet Leslie at the manor. "We should tell the others," Dick whispers. Bruce just grunts in response. Dick slips out and grabs a con. "Hey, Signal, Oracle, can you hear me?" "Nightwing, go ahead." "Update on Red Robin's condition. His fever has worsened, and we are calling in assistance." There's silence for a moment. "Do I need to return?" Duke asked, worry thick in his voice. "Negative. Just keeping you up to date as requested." Okay, I'll finish for patrol." "Thank you, Wing," Oracle chimes in. Dick takes that as a sign to remove the comm and takes another deep breath to calm himself. As often as his family gets injured, he never likes the uncertainty before knowing when they will recover. As he returns to the medbay, Dick pulls out his phone and messages the group chat. Bruce's extended brew. Ray of Sunshine. Tim has a fever. Alfred's calling in Leslie. Zombie. Stalker has a fever. Zombie. And Alpha's calling Leslie? Well, shit. Cass. Hug emoji. Sister and brother love emoji. Purple Monster. I'll give him a hug for you, Cass. I'm coming for dinner and none of you are stopping me. By the time Dick has put his phone away, Alfred has come over with Leslie in tow. Leslie comes over and does her own check on Tim, and then she spots the antibiotics. "What's this?" "Standard antibiotics. He has an infection," Alfred responds with a slight frown. Leslie shakes head. "No, I know that. Why aren't you giving him extra strength ones?" Everyone in the room looks at her confused. Dick speaks up first. "Extra strength? Isn't that dangerous?" Leslie turns on him, shock written all over her face. "I mean, normally, but he needs it. It's more dangerous to risk sepsis." Everyone in the room just looks at each other baffled. This time Bruce is the first to speak. "And why does he need it?" "His spleen? What is wrong with his spleen?" Bruce's voice has lowered into a growl. In response, Leslie speaks very slowly. "He doesn't have it." Dick jumps up from his chair and both Bruce and Alfred grow significantly paler. "What? Since when?" Alfred rushes off to check Tim's record on the back computer. "He told me when he came back from looking for Bruce," Leslie says matter-of-factly. She looks back and forth between them confused. How could they not know? Alfred returns, amazingly even paler than before. It would appear that Master Timothy updated his medical records to include his asplenia upon his return with Master Bruce. I am very sorry to have missed such vital information. Alfred's face is so still it could not have been anything but carved from stone. Bruce has not yet moved, and Dick is leaning over Tim, clinging to his hand. I shall put up proper antibiotics. Thank you for your time, Dr. Tompkins. Leslie just nods, takes one more look at each of them, and takes her leave. I can see myself out. Thank you, Alfred. Let me know if he keeps getting worse. Dick is holding back tears as he sits on the cot holding Tim's hand. Bruce is as still as a statue, watching Alfred find and attach the correct antibiotics. All three of them wait in silence. An hour passes, and Alfred has returned to the manor in order to prepare dinner for the family. Duke pulls into the cave in his signal gear. Duke parks his bike and comes to the med bay in full gear minus his helmet. Any updates? Dick startles. Oh shit, yeah. Um, did you know Tim doesn't have a spleen? Duke's eyes widen as he involuntarily steps back half a step. What? Yeah, no spleen. So we need stronger antibiotics. While they talk, Bruce goes about taking Tim's temperature again. It's chill. We're chill. My brother's just missing an organ and he didn't tell us. Dick steps forward and puts a hand on Dick's arm as he goes to start pacing. Dick drags Dick back to the seats and then turns to ask Bruce, "How's his fever now?" Bruce grunts, "Improving." Duke manages to get Dick settled into the chair just before Steph comes in. "How's he doing? Is he okay?" Yeah, well, he's improving. Alfred just wasn't giving him strong enough antibiotics." Duke responds, keeping his hand on Dick's arm. "What? Are you saying Alfie messed up? That doesn't sound right." Dick chuckles darkly. More like, "Tim didn't tell us important information." At that, Dick looks up at Steph from where he'd been staring at the floor. "Did you know he doesn't have a spleen?" "He what?" "Yeah, apparently he lost it while looking for B." Bruce just grunts and gently runs his hands through Tim's hair. Steph collapses on the end of the cot and pulls out her phone. Bruce's extended brood. Purple monster. "Did any of you know that Tim doesn't have a spleen?" Cass. "What?" Zombie. "His spleen? How did he lose his spleen?" Library geek. "I was not aware, though now I can see he put it in his records 6 months ago." Blood brat. "Of course Drake would be incompetent enough to lose organs." Cass. Shocked emoji. Purple. Monster. "Apparently it was while looking for Bruce." At that moment, Alfred comes down to assist they come up to the manor for dinner. He does come equipped with a tray of food for Bruce, however, knowing that he will refuse to leave Tim alone. "Master Bruce, ensure that you will eat your dinner. The rest of you, dinner will be had in the dining room. Master Duke, if you could please wash up before coming upstairs." Duke glances at himself, forgetting that he is still in his signal gear. "Right, of course, Alfred." At that, all of Bruce's children, and not quite his child, disperse, leaving him alone with Tim. Bruce runs his hand through Tim's hair and whispers, "What happened to you?" Chapter 5. Summary. Tim heals from his fever. The family is there for him. He wakes up lucid and is faced with some questions. It's several hours later before Tim cracks his eyes open. Dinner has been had, Duke made his way to bed, after checking on Tim, of course, and everyone but Bruce and Alfred are out on patrol. Alfred is checking Tim's temperature and blood pressure. While both still aren't ideal, they have improved a lot from when they called Leslie over. Tim blinked up at Alfred, stared blankly for a moment, then started attempting to push himself into a seated position. Alfred immediately grabbed him by the shoulders. "Master Tim, I think it would be best if you stay laying down." Bruce whips his head towards them at Alfred's voice. He had a comm in one ear and kept in contact with his other kids, and had been doing an admirable job at pretending they had held most of his attention and not Tim's prone figure. "Tim, hey, sweetheart, stay there." Tim looks between Alfred and Bruce, looming over him with glazed eyes. He blinks a few more times before allowing them to lay him back down. "What happened?" Tim slurred. brow furrowed in concentration as he fought the fever to pay attention to his surroundings.
You got an infection, chum. Quite a bad one. Fever and everything.
Bruce settled into the chair at the head of Tim's cot as Alfred grabbed freshly wet cloth to place on Tim's forehead. Tim frowned. Did I forget meds? Normally good at taking meds, Tim mutters, mostly to himself. Bruce smiles sadly. He didn't even know that Tim had any medication.
Maybe. No one has seen you for 3 days, so I.
3 days! Tim bolts upright, the wet cloth falling down his face. He regrets it and immediately lifts a hand to his aching head. He allows Alfred to gently push him back onto the cot.
Yes, I came to check on you and found you on your bed with quite a bad fever. The cut on your arm got infected.
Bruce gestures to Tim's arm, which he noticed was wrapped in bandages.
Do you know what happened?
Master Bruce, I do think this is an unappropriate time to interrogate, pardon me, interrogate Master Tim. He is still in a significant fever and will not be clear of mind, Alfred admonishes. Tim looks at him deep in thought.
You're right. I'm sorry, Tim.
Tim just nods vaguely, the glazed look coming back over his eyes. Bruce sighs.
How are you feeling, chum?
Tired, Tim slurs, clearly already falling back into unconsciousness. Bruce just smiles sadly and pats Tim's hand.
Go back to sleep. I'll be here when you're ready to wake up.
Tim just nods. Alfred replaces the cloth on his forehead. Bruce sits back in his chair and starts running his hand through Tim's hair. Alfred takes his leave, stepping back into the manor after ensuring that Tim's fluids and antibiotics would be all right for a time. Bruce watches Tim for several more minutes before turning his attention back to the voices of his children on patrol. Tim has not stirred again by the time Dick and Damien have returned. His fluids have been replaced twice and his antibiotics once. Damien goes straight for the showers, while Dick comes to check on Tim. This causes Bruce to frown. He knows Tim and Damien haven't always gotten along, but he thought things had been improving. It saddens him to know that Damien has so little care for Tim's well-being. How's he been doing? Dick asks as he brings the other chair next to Bruce's. Bruce doesn't look at Tim as he responds.
He woke up once, but he was still fevered. His temperature is almost back to normal, though.
Dick hums and places his hand over Tim. Think he can go back to his room tomorrow?
We'll see what morning brings.
Dick nods. They sit together in silence, watching over Tim. They listen to Damien as he makes his way out of the showers and up to his room. Alfred shoos Dick off to the showers and hands Bruce a cup of tea. Do I assume that you will be staying here, Master Bruce? Alfred asks, already pulling an extra blanket out from the cupboards.
He can't wake up alone.
Of course not, Master Bruce, and that is all that's said on the matter. Morning finds Bruce nodded off in the chair with his hand resting on Tim's forehead. Alfred brings down 2 trays of breakfast and lays it on the table on the other side of the cot. He returns to prepare breakfast for the 2 residents still asleep in the manor. Half an hour later, Tim whimpers and Bruce wakes up.
Hey, sweetheart, you're okay. I'm right here.
Tim turns his head to look at Bruce, with glassy eyes and fever and tears.
I'm right here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere.
Tim clutches Bruce's wrist weakly. You're really here. Thought I'd be alone again. Bruce lifts himself to sit on the cot and maneuvers Tim so his head is laying in Bruce's lap.
You're not alone, Tim. Not this time.
That is how Duke and Alfred find them when they come down an hour later. Alfred tuts at seeing neither breakfast has been touched, but does not complain more when he sees that they are both asleep. Alfred checks the IVs and Duke lowers himself into the chair next to the cot. By the time Dick comes down, Bruce is starting to stir, while Tim is deep in unconsciousness. Alfred immediately notices that Bruce is awake. Master Bruce, if you could please set a good example for your children and eat your breakfast, I would greatly appreciate it. Bruce blinks at him for a moment before grunting and reaching over to take the now cold toast. Dick jerks over the chair from in front of the back computer. Unfortunately, it scrapes against the floor and wakes Tim up. Bruce, Duke, and Dick all grimace at the noise. Tim slowly blinks into the waking world. His fever has greatly reduced, so he has enough clarity of mind to know where he is and what is happening. Bruce unfolds himself from around Tim, and Dick, after getting the chair where he wants it, hands Tim the tray of breakfast. Tim takes it blinkingly slowly. He grabs the glass of juice and just stares at it. Everyone waits to see if he'll drink it before speaking. After a long pause, Bruce opens his mouth. Before the words can come out, Damien storms over. Why are we all gathered at Drake's bedside? Bruce and Alfred raise an eyebrow at him. Duke glares, and Dick just glances disapprovingly before looking at the floor. He knows he hasn't done enough to correct Damien's attitude, but it feels too late. Tim just stares at him blankly. Bruce clears his throat and answers,
We are all very worried for your brother. We wanted to see for ourselves how he is.
Duke and Dick nod at Bruce's response. Damien grunts, then turns to Dick. Richard, have you seen that Drake is recovering well? Now you may spar with me. Dick blinks at him for a moment, his face flushing red. Damien, I want to stay here and talk to Tim for a while. I can spar with you later? Damien glares at Tim and turns on the spot and walks out without another word. Bruce just sighs.
How are you doing, Tim?
Bruce asks. Tim stills under the sudden attention, and he keeps staring at the glass. I am much better, he states simply, hoping that will be the end of the questions. It is not. That's good, Timmy, Dick chimes, leaning forward against the cot. You gave us quite a bit of fright when you weren't getting better. Bruce hums.
I do have a few questions.
Tim pales but turns to face Bruce, his hands clasped in his lap.
One at a time. How did you get injured? It wasn't in the reports.
Tim gulps. When I was discovered watching Scarecrow, the skylight was shot out from under me. I tried to grab the edge, but a piece of glass caught my inner forearm as I fell. He didn't bother addressing the report.
And why was that not in your report?
Bruce prompted. I did not believe it was relevant. It did not hinder my ability at the time, and I believed it would be healed before returning to patrol. Didn't think it was relevant? Dick burst out. Timmy, you were injured. How is that not relevant? Tim frowned at Dick's words. It didn't affect anything.
Bruce sighed. Tim, it doesn't matter if it affects anything or not. I want to know when my children have been hurt.
Tim looks at Bruce blankly. Very well, I will keep that in mind for future reports. Bruce sighs again, and he can tell Tim isn't getting it. Dick drops his head into his hands.
Moving on, how did the cut become infected?
I was otherwise occupied and did not take care of the cleaning of the wound or taking regular antibiotics from when I received the cut until you found me. What do you mean otherwise occupied, Tim? Dick said, lifting his head again to look at Tim. Tim glances up at Dick, then returns his gaze to the juice held in both hands. I had been injected with fear toxin. I had given myself the antidote, and I assumed I would ride it out while dealing with the injury after the effects were over. The antidote did not seem to work. I do not remember when the effects of the fear toxin ran their course. Bruce groans and rubs a hand down his face.
That strain of fear toxin was designed to be resistant against the antidote.
Bruce grabbed Tim's hands and waited until he looked at Bruce's face properly.
I need you to fill out reports properly. You can't hide injuries from us, and you can't hide when you've been compromised by any toxin.
Bruce stares into Tim's face until Tim becomes uncomfortable and looks away as he nods.
Thank you. One more question. What happened to your spleen?
Chapter 6. Summary. Tim evades some awkward revelations. Until he doesn't. Tim blinks and stares blankly ahead and places the glass of juice back on the table. Around him, Bruce, Dick, Duke, and even Alfred hold their breaths. Tim blinks some more. When I was looking for B, at that moment, Red Hood roared into the cave. Everyone turns to watch as he saunters over to lean against the doorway of the medbay. Hey, Timbit! Looking good to see you awake. Bruce glares at Jason while Tim stares back at his hands. Whoa, what'd I do? Jason steps back, lifting his hands in surrender. Good afternoon, Master Jason. You have done nothing wrong. Bruce frowns at him, clearly displeased. Tim, Dick whined. Jason just huffed a laugh in response. Alfred remained carefully neutral. Duke just flicked his gaze from face to face nervously. Bruce cleared his throat, then asked,
What dangerous situations were you involved in?
Tim glared at Bruce through his lashes, with his face still turned towards his lap. Jason notices this and lets out a bark of laughter. Alfred looks over the situation and decides it might be time to intervene, saying as it is now well past the time to be having lunch, why don't we all go up to the manor and find something to eat? Bruce grumbles at that, but doesn't stop Dick as he moves to help Tim get up and towards the elevator. Everyone, even Jason, trails behind Alfred as they make their way to the kitchen. Dick lowers Tim into a seat in the breakfast nook while Alfred busies himself making up sandwiches. I'll go find Damien, Duke announces as he heads off to do so. Jason follows Alfred into the kitchen and helps him make up enough sandwiches for everyone. They move around each other smoothly, like a choreographed dance that neither of them acknowledge. Bruce and Dick take their seats with Tim and watch them. Well, Dick watches them. Bruce keeps sneaking glances by Tim. By the time Duke returns with Damien, the sandwiches are ready and Tim has relaxed significantly. Damien grabs one that is indicated to belong to him and takes a seat at the far end of the nook to Tim. Duke and Jason just bring over the rest of the sandwiches and with a small kerfuffle. Everyone ends up with their correct lunch, and Alfred brings over a tray of drinks. Tim gets given another glass of juice. Jason and Bruce get cups of tea. Damien, Duke, and Dick get different glasses of juice according to their preferences. Alfred even made himself a cup of tea and takes a seat with them. They eat in silence. Tim is the last to finish, Damien having left as soon as he was done. Everyone else waited for him. As soon as he finished, Jason and Alfred take all the dishes and start clearing them. Tim decides now would be the best time to ask, "When can I return to my apartment?" Dick looks heartbroken. Bruce just looks constipated. Alfred calls over from the kitchen. "I would like you to stay at the manor until I am sure that your affection will not return, Master Timothy." Tim resists the urge to roll his eyes and keeps his voice neutral. "And how long will that be?" Alfred hums pensively. "A week should be sufficient." Tim bites back a groan. He doesn't want to be stuck here for a week. Very well. He stands up, with Dick immediately reaching his arms out to catch him should he fall. "I shall go rest in my room." He takes care to walk steadily, even if it does cost him some speed. Once he makes it to his old room, Tim closes the door behind him and takes a deep breath. He stops for a moment before crossing over to the bed and collapsing on top of it fully. He is glad that he is not wearing any shoes because he would have had to take them off. Tim's room has long since stripped of any sign of personality. He hasn't kept anything important here since he was 15. After leaving Robin, leaving the Waynes, for his father, he just never brought anything but some clothes back. Even during the brief period he came back before leaving to search for Bruce, it had just never felt like he could make the space his own. Tim must have fallen asleep because the next thing he knows, the sun is coming up through the windows at a much lower angle, and Alfred is calling him to come get dinner. Tim groans and rolls off to his feet. He trudges down to the dining room. His brain feels fuzzy, like he's not quite present. He figures that he should still be waking up, or something like that, so he opts to ignore it. He gets to the dining room last. Dick, Duke, Damien, and Bruce have all already been seated. Jason must have left for Crime Alley already. He drags himself over to sit next to Dick opposite of Duke. He still feels like shit and can't be bothered hiding it. Alfred comes in and places extra plates in front of all of them. He also places an extra supplemental drink and some medicine in front of Tim. At Tim's quirk of an eyebrow, Alfred simply states, "Antibiotics, Master Tim. Twice a day until the infection has run its course." Tim accepts this with a small nod. Alfred excuses himself back to the kitchen, and they all begin eating. Tim is pointedly ignoring the way Damien is sneering at him. Eventually, he must grow sick of not getting a reaction because he speaks up. "So, how did you manage to lose an organ, Drake?" Dick gasps and glares at Damien, but he doesn't show the slightest bit of remorse. Tim blames what happens next on his fatigue and still recovering brain. Were he the sound of mind, he would not have responded to Damien's kneading. As it stands, he muttered under his breath, "Why don't you ask your grandfather?" Everyone freezes, and Damien even pales. Tim realizes everyone is staring at him and slowly looks up and glances to face. "Oh, did I say that out loud?" The corner of his eye, Tim sees Dukes just slowly nod. Tim swallows, looks back at his dinner, back up at the faces staring at him, and decides
Escape is the best action plan. He pushes away from the table and his chair scrapes against the floor. Scrapes seem to have awakened everyone. My grandfather? What? Why were you with the league? Don't go. Alfred appears at the commotion and manages to project over it. Now, what is going on here? Tim takes the opportunity to slip out of the dining room. He hurries back to his room in his distress. He doesn't remember to lock his door, just slips in and hides himself between the bed and the far wall. Back in the dining room, Alfred is trying to calm everyone down and understand what happened. I can see that you were all distressed, but until I understand what occurred, nothing will get done. Everyone falls silent. Thank you. Now one at a time. Master Bruce, why has Tim left, and why is his dinner still on his plate? Bruce pales ever so slightly under Alfred's direct gaze. He
Told us what happened to his spleen.
Duke butts in. I don't think he meant to. Damien, at this, he throws a glare in Damien's direction, was goading him on, and he just blurted it out, and then he ran. I see. Thank you, Master Duke. Alfred notes thoughtfully. I will take Master Damien another supplemental drink to ensure he does not go hungry. I believe it would be best if he is left alone for the night. Alfred turns back to the kitchen, leaving the family behind to finish their meals. They eat in silence for a few long moments. I didn't mean to. I just. Damien whispers, fiddling with the leather bracelet on his right wrist. Bruce grunts. Silence follows once more, and they keep that hold of silence until they've all made their way to either bed or to the Batcave. Chapter 7. Damien confronts Tim. Alfred and Bruce have some concerns about Tim. Trigger warning: self-harm. Alfred knocked on Tim's bedroom door with a drink in hand. When he received no response, he carefully pushed open the door. Looking around, he frowns when he can't spot Tim. He cautiously steps further into the room where he finds Tim. He's curled up in a ball behind the bed. At first, Tim can't tell what Tim is doing, but then he can spot the blood welling up on Tim's forearm. Alfred puts the drink down on the bedside table before he hurries over to Tim. He grabs Tim's wrist and gently pulls him away from his body. Now that he's closer, Alfred can tell it's not the infected injury. Tim had just been scratching enough to cause the fresh scratches to bleed. Tim blinks up at Alfred, seeming to come back to himself. Alfred frowns down at the boy. Master Timothy, what is going on? Tim blinks at him again, then looks down to his arms blankly and back to Alfred. I I don't know. Tim blinks, and tears well up in his eyes. He swallows them down. I didn't mean to tell them, he whispers, a slight waver in his voice. Oh, my dear boy. Alfred moves in and gathers Tim into a hug. They stay there for several moments while Tim took deep gulping breaths to keep the tears down. Tim sniffs once more and pulls back. Now, Master Timothy, if I am correct, you did not finish your dinner. Tim ducks his head to avoid Alfred's disappointed look. Alfred chuckles slightly. I have brought you another supplemental drink. I expect it to be gone before you sleep. Alfred pulls Tim to his feet and guides him to the bed. Once Tim is settled in the bed, still clothed, but Alfred is willing to overlook that for tonight, Alfred hands him the drink. Tim stares at it for a moment before he brings it to his lips. Alfred nods, satisfied that it will be drunk. He stops in Tim's doorway on the way out. And Master Timothy, take care of yourself. With that, Tim is alone for the night. He's woken up next morning by Damien creeping into his room. He watches blankly as Damien, who has surely noticed he is awake, slowly walks up to sit on the side of Tim's bed. Once it becomes clear that he will not be leaving, Tim slowly sits up, keeping an eye on Damien the entire time. They both stare at each other in silence. Damien breaks first. Why were you with my grandfather? Tim blinks for a few moments, long enough that Damien starts to turn red with embarrassment. He rubs absent-mindedly at the leather bracelet. Finally, Tim spoke. I had to find B. I understand that much, but why grandfather? Tim tilted his head and shifted so he could look at Damien straight on. Tim blinks once more. I had no one else. Damien is taken aback at that. He nearly outright denies it, but he takes a moment to think about it. It was true. His young justice team has been disbanded, after Bart and Con's deaths. Dick had cut him off from any support from those working from within Gotham, and Damien had overheard Dick telling the wider Justice League that Tim was mentally unstable and had lost himself to grief. Oh. Damien looks away from Tim. Tim just stays silent and stares at him. Damien is starting to think that maybe, just maybe, he's been wrong about Tim, or at least too harsh on him. Not that he's willing to admit that out loud yet. After the silence stretches uncomfortably long, Damien pushes himself to his feet. I'm sure Alfred would like to see you at breakfast soon. I will leave you to prepare for the day. He leaves, closing the door firmly behind him. Tim stares after him for a long moment. Finally, Tim picks up his head into the attached and heads into the attached bathroom. He notices the scratches on his arm while readying himself for a shower. For a long moment, he stares at them with furrowed brows. Before he continues, he preps the bandages on his other arm for the water. Clean and feeling more alive, Tim takes the time to disinfect the wounds on his arms and rebandages the healing but deeper wounds. Once that task is complete, Tim makes his way to the kitchen for breakfast. He's still moving slower than he would like, but he is able to confidently get around under his own power. He reaches the kitchen and spots Damien and Dick in the kitchen nook. Damien nods at him, his face very serious. Tim raises an eyebrow at that, but decides not to comment. Dick cheerfully calls out, "Good morning, baby bird!" "Morning, Dick." Tim sighs as he looks at the food Alfred has set out for their breakfast. He turns away from it and grabs a drink out of the fridge. He walks over and sits opposite of Dick in the nook. A look of concern flashes over Dick's face as he sees the drink in Tim's hand and immediately wipes it away. "How did you sleep?" Tim just grunts in response. He stares at the drink in his hand for a few long moments before sighing and cracking it open. Tim takes a long sip of drink while they sit in awkward silence. Alfred walks into the kitchen. "Ah, Master Timothy, it is good to see you up." Tim gives Alfred a small smile. He's grateful that no one is commenting on his choice of nutrients, even if Dick seems to want to. He's been more grateful when Alfred immediately turns to what he came into the kitchen to do, trying not to engage Tim in conversation. Tim finishes off his drink and stood to dispose of it, only for Alfred to take it from him and wave him off back to his room. "You go rest, Master Timothy. Let your body recover." Tim rolls his eyes but walks off to his room. "Thank you, Alfred." Later, when Tim is curled up in his bed watching a show on his laptop, Bruce comes in to check on him. Tim jumps when Bruce knocks, but manages to shake out his voice when he responds. "Yeah?" Bruce cracks the door open, and Tim's eyes widen. He carefully closes his laptop and turns to face Bruce, sitting cross-legged on the bed. Tim quirks an eyebrow but drops it when Tim continues staring at him.
Hey, chum, just wanted to check in.
Tim blinks for a moment, then furrows his brows slightly. I'm okay, sir." Bruce pulls back and stares at Tim, frowning.
Are you sure, Tim?
Bruce tilts his head at Bruce. "I'm sure," he says carefully. Bruce watches him for a moment.
Tim, sweetheart, why did you call me sir?
Tim freezes. Tears start welling up in his eyes. Bruce notices and immediately moves to reassure Tim. He places a hand on Tim's arm and looks him in the face.
Hey, it's okay, you're okay, I'm just confused is all.
Tim shuffles over carefully so that he's sitting right next to Bruce. He sniffs and takes steady breaths. Bruce is taken aback by Tim's initiating physical contact, but gladly wraps an arm around Tim's shoulders. "I'm sorry, Bruce." Tim sits stiffly, with his head leaned against Bruce's side. Bruce carefully rubs his hand up and down Tim's arm. His brows are furrowed as he tries to puzzle out Tim's behavior. He initiated the contact, and yet he seems very uncomfortable with it.
You're okay, sweetheart. Can you tell me why you did it, though?
They wait in silence while Tim considers this. He sits upright and shakes his head, but doesn't move away. Bruce figures it's probably better to remove his arm away given how tensely Tim is holding himself. Bruce shifts to face Tim again and nearly misses the flash of confusion across his face. Bruce watches carefully and keeps himself as neutral as possible.
That's okay. Do you want me to stay here, or do you want me to leave you alone?
Tim's eyes flash with panic and start watering again. He holds himself very tightly, however, just shrugs.
Hey, it's alright, I can stay here.
Tim blinks and nods, but the tears keep welling up in his eyes. Bruce is starting to get flustered and is trying his best not to show it. He can't figure out what Tim needs right now. Tim seems frozen for a long moment, staring into his lap. Bruce watches helplessly as a single tear falls onto his hand. Bruce reaches out to touch Tim's shoulder. Tim barely suppresses a flinch. Actually, Tim swallows down the tears. Could I be alone for a while? He takes a deep breath and looks up at Bruce, rubbing the back of his hands over his eyes quickly, getting rid of the tears. Bruce looks at him, concern showing through on his face no matter how he tries to hide it.
If you're sure you'll be okay.
I'll be all right. Thank you, Bruce. Tim nods as he speaks, convincing himself the words are true. Bruce stares at him for long moments before relenting. He gets up and walks towards the door.
You know you can come to me if something's wrong, right?
Tim smiles sadly. Of course. Chapter 8. Summary. Tim's odd behavior escalates. Everyone now has concerns about him. Trigger warnings. Self-harm. Tim emerges from his room for lunch to find Bruce talking quietly to Dick in the breakfast nook. They stop talking as soon as they notice his arrival. Tim raises an eyebrow at them but doesn't have the energy to truly care. Alfred sends a glare at them and turns to hand Tim soup and some toast with a gentle smile on his face. Here you go, Master Timothy. Thank you, Alfred. Tim nods gratefully, then takes a seat at the far end of the nook to Bruce and Dick. They keep sending glances at each other as he eats, which he pointedly ignores. There seems to be some sort of communication going on between them until Dick finally rolls his eyes and slides over so he's sitting opposite of Tim. Dick clears his throat, causing Tim to look up with quirked eyebrows. So, Timmy baby bird, how you doing? Tim just allows the confusion to wash over his face. I'm fine, he responds cautiously. He stares at Dick, flicks his gaze to Bruce and then back to Dick. Why? No reason. Dick rushes to answer. Tim just squints at him and lowers his spoon into his soup. Okay, fine. You kind of freaked Bruce out this morning, and he's worried about you. Bruce grunts at Dick and glares at Dick. Dick lifts his head in surrender. What? Am I lying? Bruce just grunts again. Tim furrows his brow in response. This morning? Dick looks at him strangely. Yeah, Tim, you called him Sir. Tim blinked at Dick. Bruce glanced over as the silence continued. I did, huh? Tim stared blankly at nothing. Bruce and Dick exchange worried glances. At that moment, Dick walks in. He takes his lunch from Alfred with a smile and sits next to Tim. He then glances at the three occupants of the breakfast nook, taking in Bruce's and Dick's worried expressions and Tim's blank one. Duke swallows down the bite he'd taken. Oh, is everything okay? Bruce grunts and Dick stares at Tim. Tim blinks, slowly coming back to himself. Tim glances at Bruce and Dick, and when neither of them say anything, he replies, Yeah, all good. He plasters a confident smile on his face. Duke looks warily around before returning his gaze to Tim. Tim keeps his smile frozen in place. Duke just looks at him before nodding slowly. Tim picks up his spoon and quickly finishes off his soup. He takes the remaining piece of toast and starts eating it, while he takes his dishes to Alfred in the kitchen. The whole time, Bruce and Dick don't bother to hide the fact that they are watching him. Dick tries to keep his focus on his old lunch, but the tension and silence make it difficult. Tim has come back to his room when Dick whispers, That was weird, right? Please tell me someone else thinks that was weird. Bruce hums and stares at the door Tim left through, like he's trying to solve a puzzle. Alfred speaks from where he's doing the dishes in the kitchen. I do believe that we might need to keep a closer eye on Master Timothy. Something does indeed appear wrong with him. Dick just nods and bites his lip nervously. Tim is left alone in his room until dinner, which gives him plenty of time to think. He's trying to remember what had occurred this morning. He has no memory of anything happening, or speaking to Bruce at all, and it worries him. He thought the gaps in his memory were a result of sleep deprivation, but he had a few solid nights of sleep. Sure, most of those nights were a result of infection and fever, but the fever is gone, and the sleep deprivation should be as well, right? He decides there isn't much he can do besides pay close attention to what is happening. so he tries to put it out of his mind. He pulls his laptop over from his desk and to his bed. Curling up with his laptop, he starts working on the emails he's left unattended while unwell. He never intended to fall asleep, but apparently his body decided he wasn't done making up for his far too many sleepless nights. Tim is awoken by someone cracking open the door to his room. He holds himself very still, keeping his breathing even and slow, as though he were asleep. He watches through nearly closed eyes as Bruce slips into his room and takes a seat on the edge of his bed. Tim fights to keep his breathing steady even as his heart rate picks up exponentially. Bruce carefully reaches out and places a hand on Tim's shoulder.
Hey,
He whispers.
I know you're awake. I just want to talk, sweetheart.
Tim freezes completely at the touch and at those words. His breath stays trapped in his throat. Bruce notices and rubs Tim's back.
Hey, keep breathing.
Tim carefully releases his breath, and slowly sucks in another lungful of air.
That's it. Keep going.
Tim's breathing steadies, and he carefully pulls himself up so he's sitting against the head of the bed, facing Bruce just out of arm's reach.
Are you doing okay, Tim? You've been acting strangely since the fever broke.
Tim lowers his eyes and not looking at Bruce. Bruce frowns.
Are you sure? There's nothing you need to tell me? Nothing going on?
Tim nods. He stares into his lap, keeping watch on Bruce from the corner of his eye. Bruce openly stares at Tim. Bruce shuffles closer and tries to reach out and put a hand on Tim's shoulder. Tim holds himself very still. Bruce seems to notice something is off, however, and pulls his hand back. Brows furrowed, Bruce pulls back to observe Tim.
What's going on, sweetheart?
Tim looks up at him. Nothing. Bruce frowns again.
Tim, I know I haven't always been the best father, and I would like to be here for you. I can't do this alone, and I need you to tell me what's wrong.
Tim frowns slightly and shakes his head. Nothing. Bruce watches Tim carefully. I'm fine. Tim pouts. Bruce sighs, exasperated.
Tim
Starts pulling at his hair. No, leave me alone. Just leave me alone. Bruce stands, shaking his head.
Fine, okay, I'm leaving.
Bruce stops in the doorway, watching as Tim curls into himself, tugging at his hair.
Just come find one of us if you need us, please.
The door clicks shut behind Bruce, and Tim starts rocking back and forth in an attempt to soothe the raging emotions swirling inside of himself. The tugging at his hair barely registers, and soon it's progressed to Tim throwing his head back and slamming it into the wall behind the bed. As he does this, his hands fall from his head and start scratching at his arms. Soon blood is falling from both sides, and Tim is slowly losing awareness. Damien walked past and heard thudding coming from Drake's room. Confused and admittedly curious, he cracks the door open to figure out what Drake is doing. He is shocked at the scene before him. "Drake!" he calls out. "Stop that this instant!" And he does. He stops. But he turns his gaze to Damien, and Damien is just a tiny bit afraid by the feral look in his eyes. Damien tries to back out of the room, deciding Dick or Alfred would be better suited to handle the situation. When Drake pounces on him screaming, "Leave me alone! Leave me alone!" Drake is not fighting cleanly. His limbs are flailing about as he tries to land hits. He's snarling, scratching, and biting. It is also unlike Drake, and for a moment it catches Damien off guard. However, at the first clumsy strike to his jaw, Damien pulls himself together and manages to restrain Tim while calling for Dick. Dick comes rushing out of his room and down the hallway, but so does Duke, Bruce, and Alfred, even come up from the lower floors.
What is going on, Damien?
Bruce demands. Tim catches sight of Alfred, and his whirling slows slightly, but it doesn't stop. He snarls when Dick tries to approach, so he steps back slightly. Alfred carefully walks up to the two boys. "I do not know, Father. I heard unusual noises coming from Drake's room, and so I was intending to ask him what he was doing." Alfred is nearly within arm's reach, and Tim is slowing down in his movements even further. He appeared to be hurting himself, so I turned to leave and fetch Richard or Alfred when he began screaming and, well, flailing at me. "Wait, Timmy was hurting himself?" Dick squawked and tries to approach again, only for Tim to snarl at him again. He quickly withdrew. Alfred reached up and slowly drew Tim out of Damien's tight grip. Damien hesitates a moment before allowing it. Alfred is careful and looks at the fresh scars and scratches on Tim's arms. Master Damien, do you know if Master Timothy hurt himself anywhere else or just his arms? How are you so calm about this, Alfred? Dick yells. Duke visibly winces back from where he is standing in the doorway. Damien and Bruce flinch ever so slightly. Damien pulls a mask down hard, hiding any feelings he may have had on the matter behind thick walls. I believe he may be injured on his head. He appears to be hitting it against the wall. Alfred hums and lifts a gentle hand to the back of Tim's head. Tim has curled himself into Alfred, showing no signs of earlier feral behavior. If anything, he seems sleepy. Alfred brings his hand away from Tim's head to find a small amount of blood covering his glove. Thank you, Master Damien. I will take Master Timothy to the med bay and ensure he has not acquired a concussion. Bruce moves slowly to follow Alfred by the med bay, only for Alfred to call quietly over his shoulder. I believe your time would be better spent checking on your other children, Master Bruce. Bruce looks back at the hallway and sees his children. Dick looks pained, Duke looks haunted, and Damien is holding himself with carefully crafted stillness and blankness, as he has not done in a long time. Bruce grunts, but Alfred is gone. Okay, that was chapters 4 through 8 of New Meds. I hope you enjoyed. Recording this has been so bad. Oh my god, the amount of times I've had screwed up. Oh, well. Anyway, yep. See you guys. Bye. Have a good day, night, whatever time it is for you. Yeah.